Hey everybody, welcome back to World History. We're going to be doing section 3 today, talking about the Protestant Reformation. Now, our main learning objectives today are going to be like identifying issues within the Catholic Church and kind of just like starting to understand why people were starting to speak out against the church. So, it's important to understand this is a time of uncertainty with everybody taking advantage of this increased sense of education due to the Renaissance. People began to call for reforms or changes and began to question how things worked around them because they now had the education to do so. This is the point where people start to be like, well, why do we do the things that we do? Because they've learned about them. So, some causes, again, ideas of the Renaissance are pretty big ones. The church had become very secular, so meaning they'd been very worldly. They'd become involved in politics. They were calling for wars, the Crusades, and people were angry about this. The printing press allowed for greater access to education, and the clergy, for the most part, were extremely corrupt. They were wealthy when they should have been living in poverty. They'd collected fees on pretty much everything. And they sold like indulgences or pardons for sins committed. It's basically like a monopoly, that get out of jail free card. That's basically what an indulgence was. You paid the church a fee, and that sin just went away. Basically, it was buying entry into heaven. Now, some people began to question the church. John Wycliffe, this gentleman up here, questioned the authority of the Pope, was against the church's wealth, and translated the Bible into English. Derridus Erasmus, who we talked about 2 sections ago, attacked corruption, and Jean Hus of Bohemia criticized the wealth of the church. He was burned at the stake. These two would have probably also been burned if they hadn't already been dead at this point, when the church was like, we really don't like them saying that. We should take care of it. By then, they'd already passed away. So, Martin Luther, not to be confused with Martin Luther King Jr., 2 very separate people, was a German monk and a professor of theology. In 1517, he posted the 95 Theses on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. And by posted, I mean he nailed them to the door. So it's important to understand at this point in history that the church doors were basically like the community bulletin board. It's where you put birth announcements, death announcements. Oh, this person got married. Oh, this person's having a garage sale, those sorts of things. This was against Tetzel, the local priest who was extremely corrupt, like sold indulgences left, right, and center, had multiple women he was sleeping with, drank a ton of wine, basically not living like a priest should. It had arguments against the church and rejected Roman authority. And with this, it begins the Reformation, or a movement for reform within the Catholic Church. So this is 1517. He doesn't get a response until 1521, so 4 years later. Pope Leo X excommunicates Luther, basically like he's shunned, like don't look at him, don't interact with him, he no longer exists. Now, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, devout Catholic, basically very buddy-buddy with the Pope, called Luther in front of a diet, or a meeting of German princes in the city of Worms. And basically, Luther refused to recant. He's like, I'm not taking back what I said. I said what I said. And as such, he's declared an outlaw. So now he's on the run. And this establishes a new church known as the Protestants, or people that protest papal authority. This is any Christian belonging to a non-Catholic church. So, under Protestant teaching, there's this idea of justification by faith alone, that the Bible is the only source of truth. People can read and understand the Bible for themselves, and salvation comes only through their faith in Christ. Basically, the whole idea that everything's already been planned out for you. The ideas of Luther heavily spread throughout Germany and Scandinavia, so like really like Northern Europe. There's a lot of national loyalty, and a lot of people wanted to get rid of church and Roman rule in Northern Europe. Now, this is where Luther kind of is like, pump the brakes. You're getting a little too far. The peasants rose up in a revolt, being like, Luther, we support you. Woo! We're getting rid of all these things. And Luther's literally sitting in a friend's castle, like a bunch of princes took him in. And he's like, kill him. About 10,000 people are going to die. So in 1555, the Peace of Augsburg is going to be signed that basically allows these princes to basically decide which religion their land follows. If they're in the north, it's primarily Lutheran, and in the south, they're primarily Catholic. Now, there are some communities here and there in the north that are Catholic, some in the south that are Lutheran, but primarily it's along that distinction. Switzerland kind of goes off and does its own thing. Switzerland has its own history with the Reformation. Ulrich Zwingli, who was very pro-Bible and against rituals of the church, helps start the Reformation there. Now, you also have John Calvin, who's pictured here, who starts Calvinism. This is basically another branch of Protestantism. This is in Germany, France, the Netherlands, England, and Scotland. He writes the Institutes of the Christian Religion, and he is heavily persecuted, like chased across the countryside by a mob with pitchforks and torches, has to literally flee the continent and escape to America, and it incites another rebellion in Europe. Now, from this also comes the ideas of saints and sinners and the idea of predestination, that God determined long ago who would be saved. With this in Switzerland, they're going to set up a theocracy in Geneva, or basically a government run by church leaders. Keep this in mind. This is our first government type that we're talking about. Theocracy is one of those big ones. It primarily focuses on the ideas of like hard work, discipline, being thrifty, honesty, and morality. The impact of this, we get the Presbyterians, the Puritan movement, and the Reformed Church as well. All right, that is it for notes for today. So your assignments. Everybody has a reading assignment on Martin Luther on Google Classroom, as well as if you're in the honors class, the day we're doing this section of notes in class, your writing sample is due at the end of class. So please make sure you get that done. I will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.